Please welcome Bonnie Glick to the stage. Bonnie is the Deputy Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development. Bonnie's background is unique among our speakers today, as her career spreads a variety of different organizations, including the U.S. Foreign Service, the state of Maryland's Department of Aging, IBM, and then now USAID. Please welcome her to the stage.
Oh, I'm here.
And of course, our CEO, Maury Blackman.
Thank you, Ted. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Is
your
this working?
participation.
Yes,
Yes, it sounds amazing. We've already had one tech snafu this morning, so we're standing by with any other issues. But thank you again for coming. It's a real honor to be sharing the stage with you today. Bonnie and I have a shared friend back in Silicon Valley that got us together. So this is amazing. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Premise. Thank you, IBM. Thank you to all of you who are here today to listen to this important conversation around disrupting development. I'm a disruptor by nature. So as Tom pointed out, not the most orthodox career path for someone who would be of my generation, where you have one job your whole life. I've bounced around because I think that you can learn a lot from a variety of different opportunities and exposures. So I started out, like Tom said, I was a Foreign Service officer, which for all of the young people who are American citizens in the room, I encourage young people to take the Foreign Service exam because it's the neatest way to see parts of the world that you wouldn't otherwise have come in contact with. And it's also a great way for you to represent the United States in a very proud embassy community wherever you might happen to land around the world. But I sense that probably most of the people in this room are more interested in the technology side of things and then approach development from a perspective of how do we help to do good in the world. And one of the things, again, having gone from federal to industry, is I've seen you can do good and you can also do well at the same time. And I think having those sorts of incentives built into the way a company approaches development is something that we shouldn't shy away from talking about because that's part of a sustainable model. If people are incentivized to do well and to do good at the same time, it makes it easier for that work to continue. So whether it's in the technology front or it's in the aid contracting front, I think that there's an awful lot that can be done when you blend the government's mission with the missions that are driven by technology companies.
Thank you. Well, I noted you didn't mention it here, but we are from the same generation, which I'm very proud of. And I was telling, in my opening remarks, we talked about the Sears Roebuck catalog, which we actually did talk about backstage, and that's when Bonnie acknowledged that, well, we must be from the same generation, because I remember flipping through the pages myself. But back when we were growing up and back when you started your career, IBM was tech, and that's where you spent a significant amount of your career. So how being at IBM and in that tech space and the experiences that you garnered there, and now that you're back at USAID, what lessons learned? I mean, what can you share with us about kind of IBM's worldview around this space, and then what you bring to the table?
So that's a great question, and 50 years ago, IBM was tech. For my IBM friends in the crowd, I would say that 50 years hence, IBM still is tech.
Right.
Gotta say it. But the importance of technology has only grown over the course of the time that we were discussing. The use of technology to make solutions more accessible, the use of technologies to make lag times shorter, the use of supply chains to bring solutions to last miles is critically important and life-saving in programs like the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which has literally saved probably over 20 million lives since it was instituted under President George W. Bush, and transformed the face of global health around the world. Those are things that were not imaginable when we were thumbing through the Sears Roebuck catalog a long time ago. The application of technology is now expected in development programs, that if there isn't a technology component, it's likely not going to be a sustainable model. The key with the use of technology is then the ability to scale. So I spent my last 5 years at IBM working in IBM research, where the idea is that you develop proofs of concept that can then go to scale. But models that are developed in a lab are designed specifically with an idea toward scaling. At USAID, we have a global development lab that is very much in line with that same concept coming out of IBM research, which is that it's a living laboratory in which you can try things at small scale, and then see if they can be leveraged into other parts of the world. And we actually had at USAID an opportunity to work with Premise in one of these lab derivations, which was designed to track the Zika virus in Colombia. And through the use of technology and app technology, we were able to engage with communities to track Zika and find predictable ways that citizens of Colombia could engage in the tracking of the virus to prevent its spread and to address the mosquito populations. That's the kind of thing that is both an educational tool. We trained Colombians through the use of technology in how to identify areas that were potentially susceptible to mosquito-borne diseases. But we also showed that segment of the Colombian population that the use of technology is an enabler for them. It's not a substitute necessarily, but it's an important enabler. And that was something then, ideally, being able to track something like Zika in real time is truly life-saving when you think about the effects of Zika on pregnant women or women who are looking to become pregnant. It was a really important innovation that we were able to tap into.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that. I mean, we touched on it briefly, beforehand. I think one of the things that I was really struck by is, in my view, it was almost like an unintended consequence. Like we went in there to track Zika and to, understand where various areas might be that we needed to eradicate, pools of water in different areas. But what really really appreciated at kind of the close of the project is what you brought up on the education side of it, is that we essentially educated the Colombian citizens on ways that they could personally eradicate Zika in their spaces. And while the grant isn't, forever, the knowledge that got left behind is sustainable. Right. And, I think that, as we think about these programs that we want to implement, if we think about it from the standpoint of we can use tech to help people understand and learn and touch their lives in ways, we can make, we can really be transformative in that process. So that was kind of a big lesson learned for me. And, I'm just curious because we're touching on innovation, and I know that, IBM has their innovation lab and their approach, and it's something that many people have duplicated. What we have at USAID, how do you what do you see next steps for that? I mean, do you is everything that you see coming out of that? Do you see any like other areas where it can grow and become a bigger program in the future?
So the good news is that the U.S. Congress loves our Global Innovation Lab. So if Congress loves it, it's sustainable.
The whole Congress too, right?
The whole Congress.
Everybody loves it.
The nice thing about USAID is that we're one of those agencies in Congress that has tremendous bipartisan support. So we have to continue proving not just to the countries in which we operate, but to the U.S. Congress, which ostensibly is all of you, they are your representatives, proving to Congress that we have results that are coming out of the work that we do. The use of innovation helps us extend the use of those dollars that are graciously appropriated to us by Congress. There is never going to be enough money for the U.S. government alone to handle all of the problems in the world, nor are we expected to do so. But the ability to partner in the areas of technology and that we were talking about as they relate to Zika, as they relate to the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS relief, all of this is critically important for us to be able to show beyond pilot projects to sustainable models of development around the world. The use of technology has been disruptive to the way that USAID traditionally delivered development. And I would say that's all to the good. It gives us greater access to data. The world is hungry for data. How do you know where the problems lie? Well, you can look up where the problems lie and have the answer at your fingertips in just a couple of seconds that are outlining where the specific areas are that should be targeted for development assistance and that align with U.S. foreign policy interests. The USAID Global Development Lab, like all things innovative, is innovating. We're working at a restructuring of the agency that will raise the profile of the lab and the work that's done. What does that do when you have a spotlight on you? I can tell you, it forces the conversation to change because it forces greater accountability. And so the lab has been doing amazing work, again, in a laboratory environment that is designed to have proofs of concept. We have now so many excellent proofs of concept that the next step is to take them out and apply them more broadly, both to larger populations. So in the idea of Zika, there are more places around the world that are impacted by Zika, but also in the area of vector-borne diseases, there are many, many parts of the world that suffer from vector-borne diseases that aren't necessarily Zika. Malaria, of course, being the largest scale of all of those. So thinking about the innovative ways that we can take the disruptions that we've had and apply them more broadly is something that is really true to a researcher's DNA. And that's something that I think we'll be able to scale very nicely in the lab moving forward. And I'm excited about it.
So when you think about moving into 2020, I mean, what are some of the goals that you have for the agency and the groups that you work with?
There are a lot of goals. And USAID, as most of you know, is broken down roughly into two different sides of the house. There's the development side of the house, and there's the humanitarian assistance side of the house. Technology is applied to all of those, but they're very different needs when you think about them. The development side of the house is global health programming. It's water, sanitation, hygiene, education, things like that. The humanitarian assistance side of the house we were also talking about because it's still hurricane season. We're responding to natural and man-made disasters. Some things are out of our control, right? We don't control the hurricanes or the earthquakes or things like that. We do have influence from a foreign policy perspective on some of the man-made disasters around the world. You think about what those are. Some are combos. So look at Ebola. Ebola is, you could call it a natural crisis in that it's a disease, but there are man-made components about it in terms of how this Ebola outbreak is very different from the Ebola outbreak in West Africa because simply of the region in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo where it's hit. And we don't have as great access to that region for security reasons that make it harder for us to have the same type of impact that we did on the West Africa outbreak. It involves a lot more conversations with people on the ground. I'd love, as a goal for 2020 or even prior, to have a solution to the current Ebola outbreak. Venezuela is another one, a man-made crisis. We talk a lot about what happens on day one when there's a transition of government. And that is where I see the use of technology coming in full force. Venezuela is a failed state. And we will depend, we writ large, we is the Western Hemisphere, we is the global community, will be looking for what are the best solutions to bring back a country that was once the emerald of South America and is now a failed state. Everything needs to be repaired or replaced. When I talk to American audiences about Venezuela, the easiest way for Americans to wrap their heads around Venezuela is when I say there is not a single functioning X-ray machine in the entire country. That isn't to say that GE Medical has to go in and supply 1 million X-ray machines, but it's really to give a sense of the scale of the problems that we're going to be looking at on day one. And that's where we'll turn to you. USAID will be the primary agency in the US federal government that's going to be focusing on the disaster in Venezuela and the critical needs when the government transitions. So stay tuned. But then on the development side, for regular day-to-day development, helping countries on their journeys to self-reliance, that's where technology plays a very stable and important role in getting countries to have the best solutions using top-notch technology solutions that then can scale.
You know, when we were in my opening remarks, I talked a little bit about, the languages of, you know this very well, coming from IBM and being in the private sector, but the language and the terminology that we use in the private sector is far different than what we use in government. Right. And a lot of it has to do with in my thesis, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all the great entrepreneurs out there, they can essentially take risks, and they're the ones who bear the result, or bear the consequences of failures. In government, we're basically making decisions, we're making policy, we're designing programs that could potentially impact people's lives. So we have to be very careful about that. And so I just wanted to tee that up and get your thoughts on how you feel about that, since you've had so much experience in this field as well.
So that's Maury's nice way of saying that government moves slower than industry.
I didn't exactly say that.
It was a nice way of saying it. And it's true. One of the things that I think we often see as a disconnect is how, at least at AID, how we look at the world. And we look at the world differently from the industry side and from the government side. When I was at IBM, we would talk about the countries in which USAID is working as emerging markets. And USAID calls them developing countries. USAID calls the people we're serving in those countries aid beneficiaries. IBM would call them potential customers or clients. And I think that it's important for government to take a page from industry and say, these are emerging markets. And by the way, no mom wants her child to be raised as a refugee. Every mom wants her child to be raised as a consumer. So I think if we switch the way we look at the people in the countries in which we're serving, that will change the tenor of the approach that we have to them. And having more entrepreneurial approaches to populations that are being served is actually a great way, not necessarily a slower way, of finding real and lasting solutions to some of the problems. Government is inherently averse to risk. Big surprise there. The thing that's neat about USAID having an innovation lab is that that's a place where we're more able to take some of those risks, to try out some of the solutions that are coming from you, coming from industry, to say, hey, maybe we start this in a small population area and see what the impacts are, measure them in real time, and then be able to scale those. So that's why the partnership with industry and with technology is so important to us. And bridging those divides of communication is also important for us at AID to be able to look and say, just because industry looks at this as an emerging market doesn't mean that that's bad. We'd love to see American businesses invest in the countries where we're operating. That's a sustainable model. Or their own companies invest in the countries where we're operating. That's an even more sustainable model on many levels, because it's job creation, it's workforce development, and it's bringing countries, again, we talk about this journey to self-reliance, it's getting them to that self-reliant point and helping future generations have the very opportunities that every mom hopes that they'll have.
So sticking with the journey for self-reliance, what are the ways that you see data collection and data being in play that will help make decisions better and aid towards that goal?
That's great. Data is critical to everything that we do. Hope is not a strategy, is what I had an old boss who told me that, and she was right. We can't just hope that the situation is getting better. We have to plan for a situation getting better. You can't plan for anything without good data. And now technology enables us to have data instantly. And the having to wait, we were joking about this backstage, when my career started in Ethiopia, the way that we got through to people really quickly was with a fax. So there was no email, and it's hard for so many people to imagine a life without that.
Or text messages.
Or forget text
Right,
messages.
yeah.
Cell phones were like this big, the size of a shoebox. So we need the technology and we need the data all the time in real time. And it's expected at this point in time that government have those data instantly. And that's, again, where how do you monitor something that's at a great distance? There's so much technology out there now that we're really on the vanguard of using, because you've got drones out there. There are parts of the world where we can't easily go in and monitor our programming. But if there's remote technology that's available, whether it's because of topography or because of security, we may not be able to get in, but there's technology out there that will enable us to be able to monitor success or failure, right? Sometimes projects don't always succeed, but if we're failing, we want to fail very quickly and rejigger planning, because a long-term failure can have tremendous impacts on people's lives.